Are you ready to take your career to the next level? This is IISE's Michael Hughes. Earning a master's in engineering management from the University of Louisville can strengthen your leadership skills and open new career opportunities in just 10 courses. In U of L's fully online program, you take just one course at a time whenever it's most convenient, making it easy to balance life and education. All you need is a bachelor's in a STEM field. Six Sigma Black Belt certification available and no GRE required. Engineer the future. Get signed up today at louisville.edu/online.
This is Problem Solved, the IISE podcast, where we talk to industrial and systems engineers about their work, ideas, and solutions.
Welcome to Problem Solved, the IISE podcast. I'm IISE's Michael Hughes, here with IE and Ficklewood Ciderworks impresario Stefan Ingham. Today we're going to talk about industrial engineering and alcoholic fruit juice. Do those two really go together?
Yes, thankfully they do, as IISE goes with everything.
How so?
Yeah, so we, just to give a little background on how we got started, we started 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago now, launched at the end of January, and then, of course, went right into a pandemic a month and a half later. So
perfect timing.
Yeah, as with any business and starting and from an industrial engineering standpoint, the most important thing is demand and demand forecasting and planning to demand and managing inventory and things like that. It all starts there, right? So starting a new business, of course, you have almost no idea of what that demand will be. However, we did a lot of benchmarking throughout Los Angeles and Orange County, came up with what we thought we could do in the demographics and area that we were in downtown Long Beach, where we're located. And we built a pro forma model using kind of just financial analysis and the data we were able to collect to forecast what our sales would be. And then from there, we built, okay, how are we going to make the business work based on that sales data? Then when it came to actually laying out the building and how we wanted to set up production and the interface, the unique interface in like a winery, like Ficklewood Ciderworks, or a winery by license, so we can make and ferment anything from fruit. So we could make grape wine, we choose to make apple wine. The unique business model is that we have the opportunity to have not only a manufacturing setting, which as industrial engineers we're all very familiar with, but we have the customers in our manufacturing setting at the same time, which is a very fun experience and one that comes with some unique challenges. You want to do more showmanship than you may do in a manufacturing setting. So for instance, when we set up our tanks, we built a glass wall. So the customers come in and they can see the process and feel the process. We have our cellars open, so when they walk through the tasting room, even on the way to the restroom, they see all of our business.
I was looking on the website at ficklewoodciderworks.com, I believe it is. And it just looks like it would be very cool to go in there, get a bite to eat, get a glass of cider, and walk around, and you can actually see the production process. It's almost like, you take a brewery tour or a winery or a distillery tour, except you're taking that tour while you're in the bar.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, of course, it becomes even more important that we follow principles of 5S and, make sure our value streams and how we're handling material and information throughout the tasting room, as well as the manufacturing setting, are very clear and concise for our customers, as well as our employees. And so that was a unique challenge and a lot of fun to do. And it really helps the customers get more excited about the product.
Now, when a customer walks in, do they see any of this evidence of 5S and any evidence of your industrial engineering tools? They probably don't think of it as industrial engineering. They probably just see the signage and things like that you've got set up to make sure they don't, walk into the wrong door and fall into a tank or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So I always say if we do our job effectively enough, they shouldn't notice it. It should be seamless, right? So that's kind of what we go for. But as a customer walks in, the first thing you see is our bar and our tap system. we have 14 taps, and then right behind that tap system is 4 custom designed wine tanks that we had built in Germany and shipped over. And so it's very apparent that you're not just at a bar or a restaurant and like, okay, this is where the magic happens. So,
you're in operations.
Yeah. Yep. We've also created a group called the Insiders, unintended.
CIDER.
Yep. And
as word people love that. That's great.
Yeah. That group is, a bunch of very passionate individuals. Some are friends and family. Some are just early adopters and early customers, and they get to go a little bit more behind the scenes. We've given private tours, walking them through our processes, and even going so far as to involving them in the cider selection and making process. And so giving them options of, okay, we have these 3 ciders on the table. Which one do you guys want to make? Right. And then they become kind of a part of the process as well.
That's pretty cool. Now, how involved are you in selecting the ingredients and the actual brewing process and things like that? Because, I just think of cider as apple juice, like anybody who doesn't know a lot about it. But I was going through your website. I'm more of a wine in Paris or an English ale type of guy, but I'm seeing flavor combinations on your website, like a beet and date sugars, roasted and steeped pistachios, mangoes and citrus hops, apples and grapefruit zest, fennel and thyme. And I'm like, that sounds like some tasty stuff, man.
Yeah. So it's between myself, my business partner, and our cider maker. We kind of brainstorm, do little small batch trials, decide what direction we want to go, and then give insiders as well as customers that come in some tastes of those samples and see how they're doing before we make a big batch of it. So yeah, and it's very important to us. So Joe and myself have dietary needs, right? So Joe is a celiac, and I'm diabetic. And so it's important to us that our beverages are always gluten-free and low to no sugar.
Yeah.
And so that's something, maybe you knew cider was gluten-free, but one thing a lot of ciders have a reputation for is being sweet or even too sweet.
Very sweet.
Yeah. With all of our ciders, there's none that you would describe as sweet, but they do have hints of mango, right? Hints of blackberry. But we still ferment almost all the sugars out. So you're really celebrating the apple and the yeasts that we select that really impart the flavors into the wine.
That's interesting, Stefan, because even regular fruit juice, the non-alcoholic kind, anytime I'm one of those label readers too, because I just try to limit, salt and sugar and fat and things like that, like anybody's trying to have some kind of semblance of health. And you look on a bottle or a can of fruit juice and there's like 7 billion grams of sugar in every single one of them.
Yeah. We wanted to make sure everything was natural. We don't use any concentrates. We don't add any water. We get our juice. Our apples are crushed up outside of Sacramento in Apple Hill. They crush it, no preservatives, nothing fancy. Keep it really cold. Ship it to us next day. We actually just had 2,400 gallons show up today. That was crushed. That's
why we're doing this in the afternoon,
right? Yeah, that was crushed yesterday. And we're pumping that into our tanks right now. So you might hear some noise in the background, but that's what that is. By keeping it cold, we do bring it up to 55 degrees because that's where our yeast like to play.
Okay.
And we hand selected for our original blend, we hand selected 3 different yeasts. And so we essentially make 3 ciders to make one. So it's very rare that you'll get a cider here that's just made from one fermentation. We have, for example, 4 tanks set up. We'll pump the same juice into 3 of those tanks. Then we add 1 yeast to the first tank that gives it kind of the aroma, and we liken it to an apple blossom aroma. And the second tank will add another yeast that we selected that gives you the mouthfeel, and it really preserves the juiciness and the perceived sweetness of the apple. And then we select our third yeast, which goes into the third tank, which gives you the finish. And we go for a nice kind of like a mineral crisp finish. And then we combine those 3 after fermentation, and that is what is Ficklewood Original.
So there wouldn't be anything like, a single malt scotch or a single barrel bourbon in the cider world. They're all blends of different fermentations of ciders blended together to achieve a specific flavor profile.
In our cider world, yes, because with one of the unique things we do is we process like white wine, and we follow German white wine processes. There are a lot of other cider makers out there that do it differently, and they just use one yeast, and they may use different types of apples to get the flavors that they get or not.
Okay.
Some use concentrates, some add water, things like that. But for us, we found the best way to do it was to treat it like what it is, which is a white wine. And to get the flavor that we wanted, we had to create 3 different white wines and bring them together. But that's actually fairly unique in the industry.
That does sound really unique. Was there any type of an IISE tool that you used to try to come up and decide why you did the 3 different barrels and putting 3 things together as opposed to just going with putting everything in one barrel and fermenting it there?
So one of the challenges that we face is that the traditional cider making apples grew on trees, and after Prohibition in the U.S., most of those trees were all cut down. And so we are still experiencing the void of having those specific apples. And so our juice is more made from dessert type apples, like apples that you would see in the grocery stores and things like that.
Gotcha.
In order to get the flavor, we fermented single. We said, okay, this one smells great. We really like this. And we had over 100 trials that we went through in my garage.
Wow. That's a lot of trial and error.
Yeah. It was a couple of years. And we just couldn't find that we could get the fullness that we wanted from just one yeast.
That's almost more just fun taste testing.
To some degree, yes, but there's also trial, error, and then adjusting, right? So you may select a champagne yeast that you really like, and it does some interesting things to the wine, but it may bring out the apple, the juiciness of the apple, but the finish isn't quite right on it. And so we had to create like a matrix.
Maybe a decision matrix.
Yeah. So creating a decision matrix essentially to figure out, okay, how do we get to where we want to be, right? Knowing that this yeast gives us that and this other yeast gives us that. Together, they're amazing. On their own, they're still pretty good, but we can make it even better by combining them. So
how has your prior experience helped in your experience at Ficklewood? I looked on your profile and you've worked for the Department of Defense, you've worked for Toyota, you worked for Zodiac Aerospace, and then of course you had a run with Miller Coors and running a food truck and a catering service, which kind of seems like that was the glide path to get you to Ficklewood Ciderworks.
Yeah. So I had an excellent experience working with Toyota and their lean group and learning a lot of the lean tools and Toyota production system methodologies, and also coaching that throughout North America. And so that really helped build the foundation of how I problem solve. And so I'm using that every day. And I think one of the key characteristics, the key things that came out of that was always looking to, there's 2 sides to every problem in my mind, right? There's a business side, and then there's a human development side, right? And so how do we marry those 2 things together to get the result we want? So in the cellar and cider making and catering, it's always like we need a consistent product regardless of who's making it.
Right.
The way to do that is for me, we involve the employees in the decision-making processes and developing the processes that they're going to be performing, while giving them the guidance of, the quality specifications and the technical know-how of it, right? And so that's kind of how we build processes here at Ficklewood. That's how I did it with our catering and food trucks business. I got into the brewing and winemaking when I worked in Miller Coors, and that's what kind of launched me into the food and beverage industry. Then started my own business running the food side of things for it's been about six years now. And so now we bring the truck, because we don't have a kitchen here at Ficklewood. So it's kind of a little synergy between the food trucks business. They come here and we make food, and then we have the cider to provide for the customers.
So why cider and not beer? Because brew pubs and breweries are really the hot thing. You see a new one on every corner, and a lot of them are following that kind of model where they'll do the beverages and they'll have a couple of food trucks outside. I can't tell you how many of those I've seen throughout towns, even in the Southeast, which was the land of prohibition.
Yeah.
So why cider and not beer?
You see breweries by the dozens. You see wineries in certain regions, but cider, we both felt that is a beverage that really is just coming back, right? It's really, even since Prohibition, it's really just coming back. And you'll start to see it's taking a lot more shelf space in the grocery stores than it used to. That being said, the ones on the shelf that Joe and I would enjoy, in the garage together, we just didn't. The quality wasn't there. It was too sweet. It was never quite right, and we started making our own. We felt we were getting pretty good at it, and decided to share it with friends and family, and it kind of grew from there. But yeah, it's really because we see it as a beverage that it's not a saturated market yet, and we bring a unique product that even when someone comes in and they're like, "Well, I don't really like cider," I get excited by that. I'm like, good, try ours.
There's your challenge right there.
Right. Because it's an educational hill that we're trying to climb. And because people come in and they think, well, cider's sweet. Like, well, no, if it's made properly, it really doesn't need to be, or my eyes shouldn't be sweet. And so, it's fun because we get to educate our customers. We bring a product that you really can't put next to anything else that they've had. And they're always coming back. So hopefully we're doing something right.
Well, that's good. If you're getting return customers, that's listening to your voice of the customer right there, and they'll tell people and you'll get the word out. Not to mention you're in Long Beach and it looks like you got a very cool setup. Tell me about the neighborhood. It looked like there's kind of a cool neighborhood around the Ciderworks there. Yeah.
So we're in the East Village Arts District. So we're a block off Ocean, walking distance to the beach. Also walking distance to the heart of downtown. This area has been going through kind of a revitalization over the past 5 years. The building that we're in the 1930s was built as a DMV.
Yeah, I saw that on your website.
Yeah. So, and most recently it was a 99-cent store. And it needed a lot of updating. And so between us and the landlord, we stripped it down to the walls, and rebuilt pretty much the entire building. The city helped us out a lot because we were obviously investing in the city and helping kind of turn the area into it's changed even in the past 3 years. There's so much foot traffic. Most of our customers, because there's not a lot of parking, most of our customers live within walking distance. There's high rises in the past year. 3 have gone up. 1 is the tallest building in the city.
Wow.
And they're all residential and they're all walking distance. So yeah, it's really cool to be a part of this growing community. And throughout the pandemic, the support that we've had has really just been unbelievable. From our customers, people signing up for, to be an insider, getting cider delivered when, we're not even open.
Right. Yeah. That happened all over the place.
Yeah. And they're just helping support us through. And that's why I love Long Beach. I've been here 12 years now. Joe's been here, I think, 18 or so years. It's a community that supports each other. And all of the restaurants, breweries, bars are all the same. We all have a saying. We say Long Beach supports Long Beach, regardless of what it takes. There were, there were some riots not too long ago, and we all kind of band together and helped people put things back together that got broke. And
that's good.
And we just take care of each other.
That's a great community to be in. It sounds like a great location as well. So you mentioned you did a lot of lean coaching at Toyota. Do you do a lot of lean coaching there nowadays? Are you the chief lean coach for Ficklewood as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We only have a few employees, but we run everything by standardized checklists and kind of standardized work. encouraging continuous improvement. So those checklists always come with a pencil and something that they can scratch and write all over it and update it as we see. And then we come together every few weeks and kind of talk through it and adjust the standards. So that's one thing that's great is lean can be applied to any business type. There's just no restrictions on it.
I agree with you. And when, I was talking about all the breweries and brew pubs that have popped up and seeing them, trust me, a lot of them looking at their operations from what I can see, they could use some lean tools and an industrial engineer, or at least a consultant coach. But once you're kind of involved and you look for these things, you see it everywhere, whether you go, we're at the sandwich shop or your local pub. Yeah.
And it's interesting because historically, the beer industry in America is, it's a very high margin business. Beer is 97% water, right?
Yeah.
And so there wasn't a lot of cost pressure on the brewing industry and really until like the late 80s, early 90s. And even with Miller Coors, they were starting their lean journey, about that time as well. Right. And so, so there's some things that I believe are the reason for it. One is, it's a higher margin product. Two, it's batch processing, right? It's very, you can't really one piece flow.
You're not going to do one piece flow.
Yeah, you can't make one glass at a time. You've got to make a large batch. And so that's where it really becomes challenging. You got to think outside the box a little bit of, with like I was saying in the beginning, the demand planning, right? And saying, okay, well, what should our batch sizes be? And we went back and forth for months over that because it is a huge decision. And some of it's driven by I guess to some degree, it's all driven by the customer. But one thing is we want to make a lot of variety to bring people in and, hey, look at these new releases that we have and it's fun to experiment. But then when you go large scale, you've got to kind of figure out what your top hitters are and say, okay, we're going to make a large batch of this. We recently just canned 10,000 cans of our top 2 selling products. And we never thought we'd be doing that in the first year, but the pandemic did help a little bit with moving us in the canning direction quicker than we imagined.
That happened a lot. My favorite brewery around the corner, Anderby Brewing, I wound up buying a lot more canned beer from there than I expected to.
Yeah, exactly. But even with that, the cost impacts of, okay, well, we brought in a mobile canning line, and these guys are great. They're professionals. They roll their machine in, they hook up to our tanks, they can all the stuff, and they're out in half a day.
Wow.
Great. But the cost, there's the initial cost of doing that, and the volume increase isn't really, it's not a one for one, right? So it's really the cost of getting them here to do it. So now it's like, well, if we don't make a large enough batch, our cost per unit is way too high and we can't sell it, right? So it's chicken and the egg. It's like, well, we need a large enough batch so we can get our cost per product down and sell it at a reasonable margin. But we don't want to have all this inventory and not follow the lean principles that we built the business on, So it's a
Tim Wood inventory.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a unique challenge for sure. And we're learning every day and, going through being open a month and a half and then right into a pandemic was obviously a huge challenge we didn't forecast. But we're looking forward to getting through to the other side. And we're on shelves now in local liquor stores, and we're talking with grocery stores. So we're slowly taking over some shelf space in LA and Orange County, where there isn't a lot of cider options. And with LA being one of the biggest metropolitan areas, there's only 3 cideries.
Wow. So you did choose your market right then, I think. You've got a big market. You don't have a lot of players in that market. So Ficklewood could come in and with an industrial engineer behind the scenes, they can dominate.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Have you ever been part of an engineering project or team and wished you were calling the shots? This is IISE's Michael Hughes. The online Masters in Engineering Management at the University of Louisville can expand your career opportunities and prepare you to take leadership roles in just 10 courses. Classes cover topics like engineering operations, financial management, and more. You can also earn your Six Sigma Black Belt certification. All you need is a bachelor's in a STEM field and the drive to take your career to the next level. Take charge of engineering projects and teams. Get started today at louisville.edu/online. What's your favorite cider, and what are the two big sellers you mentioned that y'all were canning?
Yeah, so my they're like children. It's hard to pick a favorite. Or if you have one, you can't really say no. But it really depends on so many things for me. What my favorite cider changes based on the time of year, based on the time of day, the temperature outside. And, I can enjoy all the ciders. Sometimes I'll fill my growlers and I'll take them home, and I drive my wife nuts because I don't label them. and I do it just as fun because it's like, well, I like them all. So so
who cares which one you pick?
Exactly. But yeah, because my wife is also an industrial engineer, so you can imagine what happens in our household.
I'll bet that is one of the most efficient households in the history of the planet.
Yeah, there's some room to improve, especially with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. But yeah, so my favorite dust change. For canning, we thought it was important that we canned Ficklewood Original. It is one of our top sellers, and we always want people to start with that so they can appreciate before we add anything else to it, or add hops or blackberry or oak or anything like that.
Or grapefruit zest or fennel.
Yeah, exactly. We want people to appreciate the base and where we're coming from. And I liken it to a white wine that is lightly carbonated. And so then our other, which is the other one we can, which is our boldest, probably the other end of the spectrum cider, which you won't really find anything like it on the shelves either, is called Moody Root. So Moody Root is co-fermented with dates and beets, fermented completely dry. We roast and steep pistachios. Then we squeeze and zest blood orange and age on French and Hungarian oak. So it is quite an experience, to say the least. You get the upfront aroma of the pistachio. It's not overwhelming. It's just like a light, nutty aroma. And then the blood orange is up front, followed by a smooth oak finish, and its finish is completely dry. It's really, we love it, and our customers do too. So.
Your description is going to have a lot of us people here on the East Coast wishing this pandemic was over so we could take a trip out there just to try it.
Right. Well, that's great. Yeah, we're currently distributing just in California, but our next round of canning will be able to ship throughout the United States. So.
Oh, that's great. Because I was actually, that was on the list of my questions were you still just serving in the bar or in the cider? Is it called a cidery or a Ciderworks, or what's the proper term?
Cidery. Yep.
A cidery. Okay.
We're a winery by license. So,
okay. Yeah. So you're already starting your supply chain and logistics issues by getting stuff out the door and getting it canned and getting it into stores, right?
Yeah. So right now I am the supply chain and logistics. I'm driving around samples to everybody, and so far everyone we've given it to is interested, and we're just waiting. We placed some orders and expecting a few more orders this week. So really just got started in the past couple of weeks.
So do you drive the truck yourself?
Yeah, I just use my own truck for now. Yeah. But with my food truck experience, I can drive some pretty large vehicles, no problem.
Well, that's good. Didn't y'all have an IISE gathering there, the local chapter there? Was that earlier this year? Was that late last year? I think I remember something about that.
It was late last year before we opened to the public even. We reserved a night and a space for them, and the local chapter came in. The Kaz, who heads up that chapter, even stayed late and helped me clean up and then helped me make cider because I had some cider making things to do. So
oh man, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience. They all enjoyed it, had some great questions, and just a different different setting than I think a lot of industrial engineers are used to working in. So
yeah, well, Costicate is a great guy. He's been a big supporter of IISE for a number of years, and he encourages a lot of people to get involved. So we definitely want to give him a shout out.
Yeah, he's an amazing person.
So in your early formative years, what made you gravitate toward industrial engineering?
Interestingly enough, I actually started as a computer engineer for my first year of school. And I did computer engineering for the Air Force and the Department of Defense. I found that I missed the interaction with people. And so actually talked to a guidance counselor and was doing some research and wondering, do I want to be programming? I found that no, I want to work with the connection between people and equipment and processes. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even know what industrial engineering was at the time. Once I found that out, I said, oh, they actually already have that discipline.
They don't have to invent something for you.
Right. Yeah. So, that's kind of how I got started there. Went to Rochester Institute of Technology for industrial and systems engineering, and then did a concentration in psychology to kind of bring in more of that human element as well.
Well, that's the great thing about industrial engineering. People who don't know anything about it, which I used to be before I was hired by IISE, they think it's all technical. And yeah, there's a lot of technical stuff. You can read your IISE transactions and you can see your 17 pages of equations if that's what you want to do. But a lot of it deals with integrating people into processes and into machinery and into the mechanics and into the business operations. And there's where your human factors and your psychology concentration comes in and makes it a key to really making any operation really work. They've been talking about the lights out factory since the 1980s, but they still don't have it. So, right. People are always going to be there somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. It's just how we interact, right?
Yeah. So I read on your website something about the 9-foot high long pour. That sounds really cool. What is that?
Yeah. So that is out of our 14 taps, we have one tap that goes up to the ceiling. And so it is 9 feet up. Guests, or before when we were open, guests could come in, monitored, of course, and pour from the 9-foot tap where it falls and uses.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's a tribute to Spanish style ciders. So back in the day, Spain was not allowed to carbonate their wine. And so what they would do, and they still do for some traditions today, is they open from a barrel or they pour from up high to give it that, catch it in the glass, give it that effervescence and that slight carbonation. And so we do a nitrogen push instead of a CO2 push with our cider. Falls 9 feet from the skies. You catch it in the glass, all the foam builds up and pours over the top. And that's our tribute to, Spanish style.
What is the point of doing that? Is it just to add a little carbonation where there is not natural carbonation?
Yep. It also aerates the wine, right? So a lot of the aromas come out more. It's like when you open a bottle of wine and let it sit, or you stir it in your glass, right? It's essentially doing the same.
So why Long Beach? Is cider just kind of fit the Long Beach laid back Southern California profile? Or is that just because it's where you lived, or there was a great opportunity there, or a combination of all of those factors?
Yeah, it's where both Joe and I live. We are all involved in the community here. We knew that we'd get some good community support. And it was important for us. We didn't look anywhere else. It was important for us to establish the business and the brand here, knowing that the demographics and clientele and the community would kind of support the journey.
So what is next for Ficklewood Ciderworks?
Yeah, so we took this opportunity of being shut down we always say with every tragedy, there's opportunity. And we expanded our production. So we actually poured new concrete and brought in 4 tanks, doubling our capacity. So we can now take larger contracts. And it's really wholesale and commercial distribution and growing that. And so now if we get the call from, Costco or Target or whoever it may be, we can react and have the product, have the volume and the capacity to meet that order. So
you use the downtime to expand your capacity so you can be agile if demand pops up somewhere unexpected.
Yeah. We figured it was the only time to do it because we don't have any customers in here, so we can do construction.
Right.
We didn't want to necessarily do it right now because we had just finished construction in January.
Right.
But
didn't we do this 2 months ago? What are we doing again?
yeah, exactly. But yeah, it was the right move to make, and now we have the flexibility to grow and react. And so that again, it's, you always want your demand to lead you to making decisions. However, knowing that the size of the metropolitan area and the amount of cider available, there's a big gap, and we wanted to be able to be flexible enough to react when we do score the bigger contracts.
So is it a state secret, or can you tell me what the capacity of Ficklewood Ciderworks is right now?
Let's see. So each of our tanks is 620 gallons, and we have 8 of those. So I can kind of do the math and figure that out. It takes about 3 months to cycle a batch, to make a batch of cider from the time we put it in the juice today. So in the tanks today, the juice we put in today will be ready around Thanksgiving time, by the time fermentation is complete. And we're looking at ways to reduce that, but we also don't want to sacrifice quality. So the one thing that impacts our capacity most is cider is a wine, and it can age, and it ages beautifully over years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we have been fortunate enough to sell everything pretty much that we've made so far, but we would like to have a buffer that we can age for a year and release a vintage, a 2019 vintage, a pandemic vintage.
Yes.
So it does come where we can have the product ready in 3 months, but we feel like it really starts about 9 months after you start. And so that includes all the aging. Some of the products start to really change and evolve and peak. We have one product in particular, Weisswein, which we made with 7% Cabernet Sauvignon. And that was always a great product. People loved it.
Yeah. Then
about 3 months ago, it just... it blossomed, to put it, it really just blossomed into just a even better product than it was. And it started selling. It was great that our customers recognized it as well, because the sales also picked up. So to the capacity question, I know I'm kind of skirting around the answer because it really depends on each individual cider is unique, and when we feel they're ready to be released.
This is what I love about this job, is learning stuff like this. I had no idea cider could be aged like wine, or like those Samuel Adams long-term beers that they talk about. And a lot of the breweries are doing those types of things. So they put a batch behind, and they bring it back out a year later. And this is our 2018 vintage porter or whatever, and y'all can do the same exact thing with cider. Yeah. Now, how does it change? Because I've honestly never had an aged cider. I think the last time I had a cider was 5 or 6 years ago, and it was, you can go smack me later, but one of those like Mike's Hard Ciders or something like that. I'm sure is totally not even close to the quality of what y'all are putting out there.
So it's the best way to describe it is just like it's similar to wine, because it is a wine. Over time, some of the more, expensive and popular wines are from, 20 years ago or whatever. Right.
Right.
So, and the aromas come out, it becomes kind of richer, deeper, more complex. And it's very dependent on what is in it and what we did, so I think the apple in the Weisswein example, the apples, and the Cabernet just kind of the flavors bonded together, and aged together, and really just kind of came together and it came out.
It's kind of like a curry. A lot of your top curry restaurants, they'll make a batch, they'll let it sit a few days, and then the flavors marry together, and then they serve it to the customers, type of thing. So it takes a lot longer than a few days with this.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just fascinating stuff. Oh, how long were y'all closed when COVID hit?
Technically, we're still closed. So we closed March 15th. And till now, we're waiting for LA County to drop off the watch list. Unfortunately, they're classifying us with bars, where restaurants are allowed to be open in some capacity. They're classifying us with bars, which we don't feel is the right classification, because people don't come here to get drunk or whatever, it's more of an experience. And, but yeah, so we're hoping we open before the end of the year, October maybe, but we don't really know.
But with the canning operations you're bringing in, you're able to get product out the door still. Yep. And you're also probably able to expand your market by getting it into stores as well. So one day when you're open, you can go get your 6-pack of cider at the local Save-A-Lot or Five and Dime or whatever the stores are in Southern California. And it's like, I think I'm going to visit this place.
Yeah. And we have a constant flow of delivery and takeout going. So we're open 7 days a week for delivery and takeout. We open in the afternoons during the week, 4 or 5 o'clock, depending on the day. And we have extended hours on the weekends as well. We use local delivery services as well as DoorDash. And then a lot of people, because we're next to Vaughn's, which is a popular grocery chain out here. A lot of people walking home from the grocery store stop by and get their cider on the way home. So we're excited.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, Stefan, I thank you for your time. Is there a question that I should have asked that I'm simply too ignorant about cider operations to ask? Because this is honestly my first interview with a Ciderworks guy.
It'd be great to have you guys out for a tour sometime, or maybe even a virtual tour.
Oh, man, road trip.
Yeah.
I'm going to propose that to my boss as soon as things open up. Yeah. I would love to come out there. I'd love to try some of these because, like I say, I'm more of, your French wine in Paris or your English ale. But you've got me excited to try something besides the store brand ciders that, frankly, the reason I don't drink them is I tried them and wasn't really all that impressed.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Problem Solved, the IISE podcast, a production of the Institute of Industrial and Systems Engineers in Metro Atlanta. This podcast is produced by David Brandt, Keith Albertson, and Michael Hughes, and edited by David Brandt. You can listen to all episodes of Problem Solved and learn about sponsorship opportunities by visiting our website, podcast.iise.org. You can also learn more about IISE at the Institute's website, www.iise.org.